So first of all, I want to do a book review. This would be one of my favorite things to talk about would be books. When I go to someone's house for the first time, I go straight to their bookshelves and kind of get to know them by seeing what they're reading. So this is the book that I'm reading right now. I also, let's see, there we go. I also just finished Blink by Malcolm Gladwell, which was really interesting. But this is the book that has really been giving me a lot to think about right now. I have 7 kids. I blog over at Homeschooling for the Whole Family. And I also am on Instagram at Jen Pepito. But, my kids are my passion. And my oldest is 22 and my youngest is 6. And so I've been parenting a long time. But when my oldest were a little bit younger, we were doing family a little bit different. And we'd also been missionaries in Mexico for 4 years. So some of the stuff that we're trying to navigate now is a lot different than what we were navigating then. Because we were missionaries in Mexico, my kids really, they couldn't have easy access to peers. We didn't have a lot of issues necessarily with peer dependency with my kids because we just really had to be very well attached to each other. We were living in an area where it wasn't necessarily safe to just go drop the kids off at a friend's house. So now we're in a new area. There's a lot more access for friends. Turn my camera around. Oh, is it like, that's funny. Thank you. No wonder I couldn't see myself on the camera. Thank you, helpful person, for letting me know that we were backwards here. Thank you. Okay, so anyhow, we have a different life now. I have kids going up to college. Even my 15-year-old is going up to the community college with his older siblings. So there's a lot more access to friends, and then living in suburbia, there's just a lot more pressure to be in a group or to join a sporting event or to even go to school, to traditional school. So we're trying to navigate all this, and I want my teens to have friends. I know that there's a lot that can be added to your life by having friends, but I want to make sure I have a healthy understanding of how much is enough and what they really need. So this book, Held On to Your Kids, is beautiful. He's talking, it's backwards, I think, on there, but he's talking a lot about just how when there's a healthy parent attachment, then kids can go have friends, but they're not going to be, they're not going to get into trouble with their friends because their first dedication, their first affiliation is really with their family. He's talking about how kids who are overly peer attached are going to end up having problems more likely in school and things like that, because what is important to them is their friends and what their friends are doing. And if they hook up with the wrong kind of friends, then they'll just go with that crowd. So, and I can see how homeschooling can be so effective with this, because if you're homeschooling, you have all these opportunities to attach with your kids and to spend time with your kids. But in our case, we have a big family. So there are some kids who are like the squeaky wheel. They're easier to attach to than others. So we even though we're homeschooling, we still have to be aware that, is my kid's behavior right now, are the issues with his behavior partly because he's not well attached to us, and so then we aren't necessarily the ones whose approval he cares about the most. Not that it's a he or a she, but so, and one of the tips that he has for reattaching is making sure that you spend some time with your children that's just one-on-one, that is also not focused on a behavior issue. So, if you're he gives an example in the book about how he had a daughter who was kind of struggling. And so he took the daughter out on like a camping trip or something like that for a few days by herself and really spent the time to work on that relationship. So, and he says that this kind of time, this relationship building, is not when you ride them about their grades or get in their face about some other behavior issues. And he also talks about how, the more difficult our kids are, the more likely it is that they're not well attached. And often the problem is the more difficult they are, the less we want to spend time with them. And we've really seen a neat thing in our family this year. I'm actually schooling just 3 of my kids for 2 days a week because the other 4 are going to community college together. And so, I've had some really good bonding time with one of those kids who, when we were all home together, he would tend to attach to a sibling, and then we wouldn't, some of our interactions then would end up being more antagonistic than loving. So, sometimes just making a smaller group can be helpful. And, sometimes maybe the best thing for our kids is to go to school, but I don't think that you should send your kids to school for friends. I think that, find another way to solve that problem before there might be some leadership goals that they have or some other kinds of goals that they have where going to school is a good idea for them. But really, there are other ways to work on the friends. So the next thing I want to talk about is co-ops. So how to start a homeschool co-op. And having a homeschool co-op can be a really good way to get your kids integrated and excited about homeschooling. A lot of times are without, okay, so here's what happens a lot of times. We're homeschooling, everything's going great. Kids hit this like kind of teen years where friends start to be a bigger deal to them. And all they have for a social life is either sports or youth group where all the other kids are also in public school or are in public school. So then you end up with a situation where the kids are saying, well, I want to go to public school because I want to be with my friends. So although there are many other reasons why we love co-oping, it is one way to solve this issue of making sure your kids have enough time with friends and not too much. So the way we start a co-op, we've done co-ops for like 15 years, and I'm almost all the time homeschooling on a budget. So co-ops have been one way for me to stay in the budget, not have to pay a bunch of money to sign up for some kind of a school. A lot of my friends do classical conversations, which is a really neat option, but it's either pricey or you have to work really hard to be involved. So for us, we start a co-op. So to start a co-op, we usually just get together with some friends. So I try to pick people who my kids enjoy their kids, or I enjoy the moms, or we have a similar learning style, or we're studying the same thing. And, there have been times where we've had to not invite someone to our co-op, and it feels sad, but because we meet in homes, we really have to keep them small enough to be able to easily meet in a home. And, some of the families have 5 kids or whatever, so it can get crowded if you have 10 families with 5 kids each in a home. And we have never done our co-op at a site. There's insurance issues that you'd have to look into if you wanted to do that. And I'd love if any of you know how to start a co-op at a site in a church or getting the insurance for that. I'd love to have you post a comment or something about that. So for us, we gather together some of those people that we're wanting to co-op with. Usually I'll have a pool day, or we'll have a coffee night, or do something where we can get together with the moms and talk about what we are looking for and what are the holes in our kids' experience that we'd like to try and fill. And for me, usually it's the projects. Like, I love reading aloud to my kids. I like doing the timeline. I'm happy to teach them writing and spelling and math. But the projects are the things that I really struggle with getting done on our day-to-day school. And so I want my kids to have some fun. I want them to build some things and do some more exciting hands-on learning. So we have this meeting and we kind of discuss what we're going to teach, and we discuss what the schedule is going to look like, how many hours we're going to meet. So for instance, this year I have 2 co-ops going on. I have a history co-op that is kind of just fun. The kids all bring a report, and they have been trained to give some feedback to the other students after the co-op. So we get together, the kids do their report, and then usually right after the report, we break for snack time. And thankfully we have a pregnant mom in our group this year, so she's an awesome snack bringer. Another one of the moms always has something creative like pudding with gummy worms in it or something. So my kids are loving this co-op, especially I think because of the snacks. And because we're doing like gluten-free or sugar-free or no dyes at home. So then when they get to a co-op where there's fun food, they're like, woohoo. So anyhow, we do the snack time, and then after that, we usually do a couple of hands-on projects. So we do timeline figures, or we'll work on a flat book, or we made challah. We were studying the Sabbath a couple weeks ago at our co-op, and so we made that braided bread that Jewish people have on the Sabbath. So we also have a co-op right now that's for more intense learning. We have it divided into like 6 classes. So we have 3 different levels of language arts and 3 different levels of science. And so in that co-op, we're using the book Flying Creatures as our framework, and I'm doing the Flying Creatures project. So yesterday we painted birds, and we made little bird feeders out of plastic bottles that we recycled and some plastic cups, and my fingers got a little bit sore poking holes in the plastic cups with a screw. So we are doing that, and then the older kids at the same time are being taught general science and biology by some other moms. So this is really good for me because the kids are having an opportunity to learn with some of their same age friends, and they're having an opportunity to learn from another mom, and it means that somebody else gets to do the biology experiments with my kids, which I so far, I'm still loving reading out loud to my kids and doing projects and teaching them reading, but I haven't necessarily gotten excited about high school science yet, which is one reason why the older ones are going to junior college. So we in our co-op, we also have some writing classes. So the older ones are learning theme analysis. And that was one thing that when my older kids went off to the community college, some of them I found were not real well prepared with writing an essay. So that first semester was a little bit intense trying to help them get their essay writing skills refined. So we use Institute for Excellence in Writing for a lot of our writing. But this year in the theme analysis class, the kids are also having to write papers where they include some like some quotes of what the writer's saying. So they're learning MLA format, and they're learning how to really say back in their own words what they're learning from a book in a more in-depth way. And then the mom who teaches that class is actually correcting their papers, which I love because I have a hard time being the meanie and saying, do this, do that on your paper. So it's kind of nice to have somebody else give them feedback. And that's really one of the main beauties of a co-op is that you, as moms, you can get together, you can see what other kids are doing in their reports. Your kids have the added motivation. It's not just their own siblings. And a lot of times if you're homeschooling a family, there's a birth order. Typically the oldest child is going to win at everything, and they're going to have the best reports always. So it's nice for your younger kids if they can get learning with some other kids, and they're going to have an opportunity to write a report and have it be matched with more a same level person. So there's kind of a motivation where on the one hand, they can go and give their report and feel like, wow, I did a great job here. And on the other hand, they might be able to go and give a report and say, okay, I can see that I need to work on some stuff. So it's really motivating for the kids. And then for myself as a mom, I love to see what other moms are doing in their homeschooling. I love to see what other kids are learning and how things are working out. So it's been really inspiring for us. It's been a great way to develop homeschool community. We've been doing it, like I said, for like 15 years. And so we've had field trips. We've made interesting food. The kids have come dressed up in costumes. There's all kinds of ways that it has blessed our homeschool journey. And a few of the books that we've used have been Mystery of History. We've used that as a framework several years. The Story of the World is another one that you could use kind of as a framework. So I don't follow those exactly, but basically in between our co-op meetings, I'll do the reading, or I'll read books that are on the subject. And then when we get to our co-op, we'll do the activities and the reports. Another one, 5 in a Row, could be a nice one for co-op. There's a lot of projects in those books. So during the week, you could read the stories to your kids and then get together on a Friday to do the projects with other moms. This is an oldie but goodie. This is Kono's curriculum, and it has a lot of ideas. It's based on character values or principles. And so, but if you were going to do a study of birds or something, you could look up the section that talks about birds, and it has book suggestions and a lot of project ideas. And I started a Pinterest board for usually when I'm doing a co-op year. I have a list of books that we're reading at home, and then I go on Pinterest a lot to try and find the projects that I want to do at that month's co-op or that week's co-op. And how often you meet is really up to you. For us, we meet every 2 weeks this year. Last year it was once a month. And when my kids were all smaller and they needed their naps and things like that were a bigger issue, it was harder to meet more regularly. But as my kids are getting older and I feel a bigger need for me and them to get together with friends, we've been getting our co-ops closer and closer together. So does anyone have any questions about when to meet or how to start one? So in the co-op, I don't do all the work. I really enjoy organizing, and so I will make up a schedule and give that out to people. But when we are at the meeting as the moms, we talk about what to do. We talk about who's going to do what, and people can kind of volunteer and say, I feel like I'm better at this and I'd like to do this job. But typically we all take turns to bring food. Either everyone brings food every time, or the moms are signed up to bring food. We also take turns to host. It can get to be a lot if you're the one hosting all the time. We also try to get a schedule on the calendar ahead of time. So right now we have the schedule for the year on the calendar for our co-ops, as well as what we're teaching. So for instance, this is a grid that shows our main co-op. Actually, I don't have it, but okay, so this is a grid that shows our main co-op, and I've done a lot of scribbling on here lately, but we have all the days over here. We also have all the people who are hosting and the people in charge of the snack, and then there's the different sections. So in the section, we've written down, what lesson we're learning, and that way families can talk about it ahead of time. They can do the learning ahead of time, and they can, if you have a test that you have to study for ahead of time, you know exactly what you're studying for. We also usually use a Facebook group. It's kind of helpful. I'm not in love with Facebook, but it is a helpful, easy way to just post in messages. You can post documents on there. So for instance, we have some grammar work that we're doing in the co-op, and I usually just post the document for that grammar work. We also kind of try to open our meetings with a group time where we pray, we talk about the expectations, and then the kids give their reports. And starting with everyone together is a nice way to kind of get some cohesiveness going before you split off into your activities. We also try to be a little bit clear about expectations and rules ahead of time. I want to make sure that we're not going to someone's house and then just totally trashing their house because we haven't had any expectation or clarification on what was expected. So it's been really lovely doing a co-op. It's enriched our homeschool in so many ways. And like I said, it saved us a ton of money because a lot of these, I know that in certain areas, you can find classes that your kids could take for science or writing or a co-op, but being able, or a paid for co-op, for instance, but being able to co-op with our friends has built deeper friendships, has built community, and it's definitely been a great way to give my kids some extra learning opportunities while still keeping us in that budget that we have. So if anybody has a question, now would be a good time to post. And if not, I'm going to go get back to some reading out loud.